The moment Syra opened her window, Idris felt his whole world stop. He had not meant to be caught. He had not meant to be standing there with his coffee cooling in his hand, staring across the narrow courtyard between their apartments like a lonely man who had forgotten where privacy ended and shame began. But she had seen him. And instead of screaming, instead of shutting the curtains, instead of looking at him like he was some terrible stranger, she lifted the window with both hands, looked straight into his eyes, and spoke first. "Before we continue, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the idea that even broken people can still find light again, please like this video, comment your thoughts, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to Ancient Truth." It was late morning, the kind of bright day where the sun made every window look honest. Idris Rahman had lived in apartment 4B for almost 7 months, but he still moved through it like a guest who had overstayed. His kitchen was clean, his furniture was simple, and his walls were mostly bare except for one framed photograph of his mother standing beside a jasmine tree. After she passed away, silence had become his roommate. He worked from home as a technical illustrator, drawing machine parts and building diagrams for people he never met. His days were quiet, predictable, and painfully empty. Across from his kitchen window lived Syra Villani, the new neighbor in 4C, a woman who seemed to carry daylight with her whenever she came home. Syra was not loud or dramatic. She watered her balcony plants every morning, arranged fresh flowers near her window, and sometimes hummed softly while folding laundry. Idris noticed these things not because he was careless, but because loneliness teaches the eyes to search for life. He had never spoken to her beyond a polite nod near the mailbox. He knew only that she worked at a children's art center, carried canvas bags filled with papers, and smiled at delivery drivers as if kindness cost nothing. To Idris, she became a small reminder that the world was still moving outside his grief. That morning, he was standing near his kitchen window when movement across the courtyard caught his attention. Syra's curtains were partly open. She was preparing for the day, moving quickly around her room, unaware at first that the angle of the window exposed more than she probably intended. Idris froze. A decent man would have looked away instantly. He knew that. His chest tightened with guilt before he even understood what he was doing. He looked down at his mug, then back up, trapped between surprise and shame. It was not desire that held him there as much as the shock of being pulled into someone else's private moment. Then Syra turned, saw him clearly, and everything inside him collapsed. Her face changed, but not the way he expected. There was no panic. No anger thrown through the glass. She held the curtain against herself, studied him for a long second, and then slowly opened the window. Idris stepped back as if the air itself had accused him. His mouth moved, but no words came. Syra leaned slightly forward and said, in a calm voice that somehow hurt more than shouting, that people are not windows to look through when you feel alone. Idris lowered his head. The words landed heavily because they were true. He apologized immediately, not with excuses, not with nervous laughter, but with the broken honesty of a man who knew he had crossed a line. He told her he was ashamed. He told her he would close his blinds from now on. He told her he had not meant to disrespect her. Syra watched him carefully, and for a moment the sunny courtyard felt colder than midnight. Then she said something that changed the whole shape of the day. She told him she had noticed him for weeks, not staring in that way, but standing alone in the mornings like someone waiting for a life that had stopped coming. She said she was angry, yes, but she also knew the difference between cruelty and emptiness. Idris could barely look at her. No one had described him so accurately since his mother died. He wanted to disappear, but Syra's voice softened just enough to keep him standing there. She told him that if he was truly sorry, he could start by becoming someone who chose respect even when no one was watching. After that, she closed the window. For the next few hours, Idris could not work. The lines on his screen blurred into useless patterns. He kept replaying the scene, hating himself more each time. He shut every blind in the apartment, even the ones facing walls. He threw away the cold coffee, washed the mug twice, and sat at the kitchen table with his hands clasped so tightly his knuckles whitened. Shame is strange. It can either make a person defensive, or it can make them honest. For the first time in months, Idris allowed himself to admit that he had been slipping into a version of himself he did not respect. At noon, he wrote a note. It took him nearly 40 minutes because every sentence sounded too small. Finally, he wrote that he was sincerely sorry, that she owed him nothing, that he would respect her privacy completely, and that he was grateful she had spoken to him with more dignity than he deserved. He placed the note in an envelope and left it under her door, then returned to his apartment feeling like a boy who had broken something precious. The next day, there was no response. The morning after that, still nothing. Idris accepted it. Some apologies are not paid back with forgiveness. Sometimes they are paid forward through changed behavior. He moved his desk away from the window. He bought thicker curtains. He stopped drifting through the day and began walking outside after lunch. At first, the sunlight felt harsh, but gradually it became bearable. He visited the small park 2 blocks away, called his older cousin after months of ignoring messages, and even cleaned out the box of his mother's old things that had been sitting unopened beside his bedroom wall. On the 5th day, he found a small paper bag outside his door. Inside was a packet of jasmine seeds and a note from Syra. It said she accepted his apology, but trust would take time, and that maybe he could plant something instead of standing at windows. Idris read the note 3 times. The last line nearly broke him. It said, "Some people stare because they are empty, but empty places can grow gardens too." That afternoon, Idris went to the hardware store and bought soil, a clay pot, and a small watering can. He planted the jasmine seeds on his balcony with careful hands. He did not know if they would grow. He only knew he needed to try. Over the following weeks, the plant became part of his routine. Every morning, he watered it before work. Sometimes Syra was on her balcony watering her own plants, and they would exchange a quiet nod. No long conversations. No forced friendship. Just 2 neighbors letting time do what apologies could not. Then one bright Thursday, Idris heard a crash from across the hall. He opened his door and saw Syra struggling with a fallen box of art supplies. Colored pencils rolled everywhere like tiny pieces of a rainbow. She looked tired, her hair loosely tied, her expression strained. Idris asked from a respectful distance if she needed help. Syra paused, then nodded. Together, they gathered the pencils, paints, and papers. She explained that the Children's Art Center had lost funding, and she was carrying extra materials from home because she refused to let the kids show up to empty tables. Something shifted in Idris. For months, he had drawn technical designs for companies that never thanked him, but he had forgotten that art could also be a shelter. He offered to design printable coloring sheets and posters for the center free of charge. Syra looked surprised, cautious, but interested. She accepted one design. Only one. Trust, after all, grows in small containers first. That evening, Idris worked with more focus than he had felt in a year. He created a series of simple drawings: kites, gardens, city streets, birds, and children holding lanterns. He sent them to Syra with no expectation. The next day, she replied with a photo of a classroom table covered in his printed pages, children coloring every corner with wild, fearless joy. Idris stared at the image for a long time. His apartment did not feel quite as empty after that. Weeks passed, and their connection became something careful and genuine. Syra would sometimes leave extra art center flyers by his door for design help. Idris would leave printed sheets or small plant cuttings from his balcony. They began talking in the courtyard during daylight, always in open spaces, always with the ease of people rebuilding respect brick by brick. Idris learned that Syra had moved there after ending a painful engagement. She had chosen the apartment because the light reminded her of her grandmother's house. Syra learned that Idris had lost his mother and then lost the courage to live fully after her. One Saturday morning, the art center hosted a small exhibition for the children. Syra invited Idris, not as a date, not as anything complicated, but as the person who had helped make the walls beautiful. Idris almost refused because crowds made him nervous, but then he remembered Syra's note about empty places growing gardens. He put on a clean shirt, carried a framed print he had made for the center, and walked there under a golden daytime sky. The exhibition was simple, but it felt magical. Children pulled parents from wall to wall, pointing proudly at drawings of birds, houses, and imaginary planets. Syra stood near the entrance in a blue dress, laughing as a little girl placed a paper crown on her head. Idris watched from a distance, not with the old loneliness, but with quiet gratitude. When Syra saw him, she smiled and waved him over. For the first time, he did not feel like a man hiding behind glass. Near the end of the event, a boy named Rafiq tugged at Idris's sleeve and asked if he was the artist who made the lantern drawing. Idris nodded. The boy held up his colored version, messy and bright, and said it looked like hope. Idris felt his throat tighten. He had spent so long thinking hope was something grand, something that arrived like thunder. But here it was in a child's hand, made of crayon and paper. After the exhibition, Syra and Idris walked back to the apartment building together in the afternoon light. The street smelled of warm pavement and bakery bread. Syra told him she had been afraid to trust people again. Idris told her he had been afraid to become visible again. Neither of them made promises they were not ready to keep. That was what made the moment real. They were not rushing into romance. They were stepping into honesty. When they reached their floor, Syra stopped outside her door and looked at him with the same steady gaze she had used the morning she caught him. But this time, there was no hurt in it. She told him that the worst moment between them could have stayed around, but he had chosen to turn it into change. Idris answered that she had given him a chance he had not earned, and he was trying every day to become worthy of it. Months later, the jasmine bloomed on Idris's balcony. Small white flowers opened in the daylight, filling the air with a gentle sweetness. Syra stood beside him in the courtyard below, holding a box of art supplies donated by parents after the exhibition. The children's center had survived. Idris had begun teaching a weekend drawing class there. And the man who once lived behind closed blinds now spent his Saturdays helping children draw windows filled with sunlight. If this story touched your heart, please comment below, like this video, share it with someone who believes people can change, and subscribe to Ancient Truth for more emotional stories about kindness, healing, and second chances. Special request: comment kindness can change everything if you believe one honest apology and one brave act of forgiveness can rebuild a life. Idris and Syra did not become perfect people. They became better people, slowly, gently, in the honest light of day. Their story was not about a mistake being erased. It was about a mistake being faced. It was about a woman strong enough to set a boundary and compassionate enough to see a wounded soul behind it. It was about a man humble enough to accept shame without hiding from responsibility. And in the end, the window between them was no longer a place of guilt. It became a reminder that every heart has a view, every soul deserves respect, and sometimes the first step toward love is not being seen at your best, but choosing to become better after being seen at your worst.